The SGPN Fantasy Football edition of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Bird Dog Shorts. Dominate summer with an amazing pair of shorts and a free Yeti-style tumbler when you order over at birddogs.com/pool. That's birddogs.com/pool. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SGPN Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Emerson Beery. My co-host, Justin Bruni. How are you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. Happy Sunday. Ready to talk some Dynasty. We're doing some buy and sells, and I think we got a pretty good list put together for you guys. So very excited to get into the booth and talk some ball today.
Absolutely. Our lovely editor-in-chief here has a child due in the next week. So, we were joking before the podcast, we could have a mid-exit podcast for the baby being born. So, that would be that we were just talking how great that would be for the podcast. So,
the little lady is due July 3rd. It's June 25th. So it could have been yesterday for all I know. It could be any minute now. So she is ready to pop out. We're anxiously awaiting.
Well, congratulations to you, my friend. I am feeling fresh as always coming off these weekend bartending shifts. I do have a day off today. I'm going to probably be hitting the farmer's market after this podcast as well, stumbling down there.
Stumbling down there? You said you're on your third cup of coffee. Sounds like you're going to be running through that.
Third cup of coffee and second whiskey already at 11 a.m. So,
all right, my man. Cocktails and dreams. Let's ride.
That's what we're rolling with today. Dynasty Fantasy Football. Buys and sells, and I tried to come up with the most polarizing list I could to try to get us on both sides of the issue here. And we'll cover quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight end today. So we'll go through across a couple of the positions. So up first, I wanted to talk about Kirk Cousins because this offseason has been super interesting. Kirk Cousins has always been a buy for me because he's always been disrespected, always ranked as a low-end quarterback 2 and a borderline quarterback 1 producer. However, it seems like he's finally getting some respect. I was listening to Matt Kelly and some of the guys on Player Profiler the other day, and I heard them talking up about the fact that, somebody took him in the second round of the mock draft that they were doing on there in a Superflex league. So they were like, well, I didn't want to wait on a quarterback. I want and somebody talked about him being locked in for the next 5 years, and I'm just not sure that's the case. You know what I mean? The Vikings. How many times, I guess, can they run it back, I guess, is my opinion. So, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on what you see Kirk Cousins. And as he climbs into that kind of borderline quarterback 1 territory in dynasty leagues, as high as he ever has been in his mid-30s, do you see him still as a buy candidate?
I think you can consider him a buy candidate, but I think the 5-year window is a bit rich. I think the next 2 to 3 seasons, he could bring, put high-end QB1 numbers. I mean, there isn't really a ton of competition around the league right now. The next guy that we're going to talk about finished right behind him last year in quarterback rankings, and Kirk Cousins is coming off a top 6 season. 7 out of his last 8 seasons, he's passed for over 4,000 yards. Definitely something to like. Last 2 seasons prior to this year, he still did finish as a QB1, QB 11 and 11 in back-to-back seasons, but then 19 and 13 the 2 years prior. So these last 8 years or so have been pretty solid for him, but I think that his window is dwindling. I'm not so concerned about like the contract extension or anything like that. I do see him being connected to the Vikings for at least this season and most likely the next 2. I think that he would sign maybe, a friendly a team-friendly 2-year contract that's going to get him paid through these next couple of seasons. And then maybe from there, he could get into a situation where he wants to, I don't know, maybe go to a team that's just missing that last piece, that's missing a QB. But I don't know if I would see him playing beyond 37. He's 34 right now, but he's in a very good situation. Like, you're playing alongside one of the best receivers in Justin Jefferson. You're playing in a vertical offense headed by Kevin O'Connell. I think he's a very good fit for that offense. And I really just don't see a lot of other options around the league to attack if you're going to, supplant him even in the next season. So I feel like he has a relatively safe floor for this season and next. So I would say that he's a buy candidate, in this situation in Dynasty, that you need someone right now to get you over the hump. Someone that can get you either into the playoffs or at least give your team that safer floor, to make a run. I think he definitely falls into a huge sell category if your team isn't ready to win right now. If you're reading your roster appropriately and it's telling you, hey, it's not in the cards this season, it's not in the cards next year, then by all means, dumping off a 34-year-old quarterback isn't, a big issue. Like, it's not going to be a polarizing, option to get off of him, I would say. So while I am personally willing to go out and buy him, I think this is very, again, situational where, if your roster is just trash, I think it's time to get off of Kirk Cousins and maybe, try to pull back, a first round pick if you can do, a team that might be a little bit more desperate, to make a run right now. So I think there are situations where the answer goes both ways. But to me personally, I have him more in a buy category than a sell category.
I just noticed while you were talking, I was like, oh man, I was hating to steal your graphics over there on the Heroes and Villains podcast. Andrew's going to be coming at me for copyright infringement.
Oh, do we have that on there?
I had that for like the first 6 minutes. So sorry, Andrew, if you're listening, I was stealing your graphics for the first part of the show.
I guess I probably should have noticed that when we started, but yeah, I did see like a blink of my eye there. I was like, oh, something went across the screen. I didn't catch that.
I changed it back. Going to keep it. I need to get on Canvas and start creating some fun stuff on there. So kudos to you guys over there. But, I was actually talking about, I was doing a Apex Age Player podcast yesterday or the day before. And I brought up Kirk Cousins here because I know what we've seen with Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers over the last few years, but this is kind of if you're not those kind of players, this is he's getting into that territory where we start seeing some decline usually from these quarterbacks, the Matt Ryans of the world. Phillip Rivers, we saw some decline as we got into about 35, 36 season here. Kirk Cousins comes up, it doesn't show in the fantasy numbers, but coming up short in big moments. My just question is, I know the Vikings are a good team and they're probably never going to be in a high draft pick, maybe to take that quarterback, but how many times do they keep wanting to run it back with Kirk Cousins? I suppose doing the same thing every year and coming up short. So I do think you're right. I do think there's a 2 or 3 year window of production here, but that 5-year window, I just don't see it. And I was actually bringing him up as a potential sell because maybe not to every manager, but I think in a super flex league, you saw somebody, like I was saying, an experienced drafter on Player Profiler taking him in the second round of a super flex draft. I think you could get maybe near 2 first-round picks of value for Kirk Cousins. And if that's the case, then maybe he is a sell candidate for me, Moving up, what can you add for Kirk Cousins? Maybe for a Dak Prescott, a Kyler Murray, a Deshaun Watson, who continually gets disrespected. So that would be, something I would search for. Maybe he is I'd also, I was hearing our listeners give us some trades yesterday where they got Kirk Cousins for a couple seconds of value, in which case he's a massive buy. So a very polarizing player, someone who could end up being another top 12 quarterback finish this season. However,
would you do that trade though? Kirk Cousins for 2 seconds? I hope you have more quarterbacks.
Oh, well, no, I would definitely take Kirk Cousins in that scenario.
Yeah. I was going to say.
He's definitely a buy in that scenario.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of situations where, like for the right offer, I'm definitely willing to sell him. But again, if I'm on a win now roster, I feel like I'm going to hold him close to the chest. I just feel like if you're looking to make a run this season or next, he's still a good fit for that. Again, I don't see him going anywhere this offseason. I think that the quarterback market, honestly, is a bit dry. If Marcus Mariota was able to get a starting job last year, if you have guys like Desmond Ridder starting this year, like look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, for goodness sakes. Like, I just feel like it's a bit of a drier market, and I feel like he is going to still be valued as a top 10 QB for at least, again, the next season or two.
But this is one of those players that you can get such a difference in trade value in dynasty leagues, just depending on which manager it is, which league it is. You could see him go for, like I said, a top 15 dynasty wide receiver, top 10 dynasty wide receiver, or you can see him sold for pennies on the dollar. It just depends on how that manager views him. Your more savvy drafters, your more experienced drafters are definitely going to hold Kirk Cousins in a little bit more high esteem. So, before we dive into our next player here, I just want to give a shout out to our friends over at Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. Bird Dogs they fix the issues with CloudNet fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches so you can get way slimmer without having to sacrifice movement. I've been taking these out, during football. Some badminton during the summertime, very versatile, then head to the bar afterwards. So, they look good and you can do some more athletic stuff in them too. So I've been enjoying them myself. And, go to birddogs.com/pool and enter the promo code pool for a free Yeti style tumbler too with your order. That's birddogs.com/pool for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Okay. Next up, I have Geno Smith. And, this is another player that, man, you're just going to have a big difference in value depending on who you are talking to. Geno Smith coming off a fantastic season. However, he did spend nearly a decade on the bench in the NFL. So it's hard to envision Geno Smith failing in this offense. One of the best skilled, you have Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, the players are endless. So, where do you see Geno Smith going these next few years? And do you think he's properly valued as a mid-tier quarterback too in dynasty leagues?
The disrespect to Noah Fant. Come on now. They got some tight ends there. No, I like Geno Smith as a buy candidate in the sense that he shouldn't cost a lot, at least in my opinion, because most teams that are going to own him in dynasty, most likely added him as a surplus and or off waivers. So I feel like he is buyable in the sense that whoever does own him should have the ability to get off of him, right? So like one of the teams where I own Geno Smith, I also roster Kyler Murray and Aaron Rodgers. Now, I haven't gotten off of Geno Smith just yet because I kind of need to wait and see what happens with Kyler Murray a little bit here. But that's a situation where I'm looking around my league and I'm saying, like, you know what? Like, I don't necessarily need, two older QBs. I can probably get off of one of these guys. And I feel like Geno will have a little bit more of enticement to my fellow league mates, whereas Aaron Rodgers could be, again, just like in his last 2 years, where Geno Smith, while he's still 32, he's found his stride. He found a great spot in Seattle. Him and Pete Carroll seem to have a very great relationship, and he's coming off of a polarizing season where he was, a top 5 QB in fantasy. And where I am, skeptical for him to do that again, I still think that he can finish around QB1 territory, maybe flirt with it. I don't think it's crazy to say that he's going to finish as a top 14 QB this season, again, with the weapons around him and how efficient he was and showed us he can be last season, in this Pete Carroll offense. So I feel good about him, but I would say that he's a buy in the sense that it shouldn't cost me a lot. If I'm selling him, I'm probably not getting a huge amount back. I don't think that he's going to warrant a first round pick in dynasty. So I feel like, the better situation with him is to buy him because it's most likely not going to cost you a lot. Sure, again, very similar to Kirk Cousins, for the right price, I would be willing to sell him, but I just don't think that you're going to get high yield returns on his availability in the trade market.
If a contender came to you in a dynasty league with a first round pick, you expect it to be later. Are you going to take that for Geno Smith?
Yeah, I think I could talk myself into that. I think getting myself, hopefully I still have a first round pick, and me, I've probably lost that year and the following year. But yeah, in the right situation, if you already have a first round pick and now you're getting a second, I really don't even need to know that market. I'm just going to feel good about that. Realistically, whenever I can get 2 picks in any round, I'm feeling really good. So getting more exposure to, the first round. And again, as long as I don't need them, As long as I'm one of these teams that, purchased him at a surplus, took him as my third or fourth QB in a startup maybe last year, or was able to grab him off of waivers the year prior, I really have no problem with that. I mean, obviously you always like, higher mid-round, but that obviously, that's going to be tough. Like getting a top 5 potential pick for Geno is going to be tough. So yeah, if you gave me a late first, I think I'd feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I probably would do that too. If I didn't really need him, I was on it. Especially if I was, I didn't think I was. Yeah, exactly. I didn't need him for a competing team.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this draft class has taught us a little bit about future projections and what we know. I was just buying first round picks. We were holding future first round picks with very high value, and those first 6 picks in dynasty leagues were still very valuable. But we saw Devon Achane and Kendre Miller and players like that were not players we were expecting to take in the late first round. We were expecting a lot more. So, I would be a little. I would maybe want a second round pick on top of that, but I would probably be selling Geno Smith for a first round pick. It's an outlier season. He's not going to add too much with his legs. He has some underrated mobility maybe, but he's not going to add too much fantasy production with his legs. You're betting on higher passing outcomes every single season. Already entering his mid 30s. It's hard for me to see Geno Smith putting up a 4 to 5 year dominant stretch here. It's within the range of outcomes, but I think he probably more than likely settles back into kind of quarterback 2 territory. And his future success will be dependent, kind of like I was alluding to on Kirk Cousins, is just keeping Seattle productive and out of kind of that top 10, top 15 territory where they might be inclined to take maybe a signal caller there. So I think Geno Smith's probably safe for the next couple of years for sure. But if Seattle were to fall off, if he were to get injured, I think he could be very easily replaced. So that's why I think kind of falls more into that kind of probably back half quarterback 2 territory, quarterback 17, 18 range for me. So depending, just like Kirk Cousins, it really does depend on the manager you're talking to. If I was in the same sense, if you were a competing team, you were just a quarterback away, you see yourself as top 4 or 5 roster in your league. Are you going to send a first round pick for Geno Smith?
Probably not. No. If I was going to send a first, I would rather send it for like Kirk Cousins, the first guy that we talked about. Between the two, I think that there's probably another option out there. I may even be willing. Well, I wouldn't send a first for Aaron Rodgers, but I would be. Those are the types of guys I would be targeting. Higher age QBs in good situations for potentially this season and next. I think all 3 of those guys would fit that mold. So whoever I could get at the cheapest cost.
So it's hard for me to, So it's hard for me to give him a buy then, because I don't think managers are going to sell him for a second round pick. So I think Geno Smith more of a sell for me, but not someone I'm shoving out the door, but leans more of a sell.
Yeah, again, it'll be dependent on your league. I've seen some weird Geno trades, so I mean, I've seen him go for a second and a player.
All right. Before we dive into the running backs, I just want to give one more shout out to our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. The show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball Mania 4 is here, and Underdog Fantasy is giving away $15 million in prizes. Underdog Pick'em is also a great way to get down on your favorite MLB and college baseball player props. So many ways to win over on Underdog and active in so many states. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN. Okay, diving into the running backs here. The first one I wanted to talk about is one of the most polarizing fantasy football players this offseason, I think. That's Dameon Pierce. Strong stretch of production to start off in Houston last year. However, kind of falled off at the end of last year, banged up, missed the last few games. Not very high draft capital, wasn't super productive at Florida, not a great athlete. That's what kind of makes him a sell candidate for me. I think there is certain dynasty players I found who kind of push him toward that top 15 mid-tier RB2 value, and I think this is a good jumping off point. In a bad Houston offense, I think CJ Stroud going to be acclimating to his environment. I think touchdowns could be hard to come by. There could be some short drives. I think Devin Singletary there to vulture a score or two. I think Dameon Pierce could be in for a little bit of a rougher season. So I also find, players with these kind of draft capital are also very easily replaced. So Dameon Pierce kind of falls into that sell category for me. As usually any running back with that was really productive as a rookie coming off day 3 draft capital, I usually think is a sell, as most running backs are this time of year. What's your thoughts on Dameon Pierce?
I'm actually putting him in more of a buy category because I feel like his value is coming down. I feel like he's becoming more affordable. And I do believe the Houston offense will be better than last year. I don't think that they're going to get worse. I don't think Davis Mills is going to beat out CJ Stroud. I think they have more weapons at receiver. While Devin Singletary is there, I think that Devin Singletary presents an opportunity to obtain Dameon Pierce at a lower cost, because if you're looking around, the talent around him, those levels are rising. So I feel like he should benefit from being, still somewhat of a featured back. Like, I would expect him to get over 250 touches this upcoming season. Now, I think there could be an argument for the following season after, if CJ Stroud takes an elite step forward, which I think you and I, based on our prior discussions, would agree that's probably going to happen after his rookie season. So I think for this next upcoming year, I really don't hate what the opportunities look like. He's still 23 years old. Yeah, Devin Singletary will be around him. Number 1 in explosive rating last season for running backs. But again, I just still feel this team is going to need to lean on the run, and I feel like they're going to lean on Dameon Pierce quite a bit this upcoming season. Last year, he had exactly 250 touches through 13 games. Even with a bit of a regression, a few less touches a game, I still see him hitting that nod. I think that you had mentioned the touchdowns. I think that's really what you're looking at. Is he's probably not going to be someone that's going to have like that double-digit type of exposure or opportunity. So, if that's a big deal for you, like, and maybe your league is more closer to standard scoring and you need touchdowns from your running backs, then yeah, sure, I could see people getting off of him. But he had 5 total touchdowns last season. I think that he can move upwards on that number. It just may not be with impeccable growth. I could see him walking away with this next season with 7 to 8 touchdowns, but maybe he only has around like 1,000 to 1,100 rushing yards. With not a very high yards per carry, but just getting a lot of touches. So I think the pricing is getting better for him. If you ask me, in September last year or August last year, his cost would have been through the roof. And I think right now, coming off a season where he finished RB 28, I just feel like he's priced very well. And if you're in need of a younger running back, I think he should be a buy target.
What do you think? What do you think you could buy? What do you think you could send to get him right now?
I don't think that you would need a first. I think that you can definitely get him for a 2nd-round pick, and maybe the team that you're trading him to has a couple of Eagles running backs, and you have Rashad Penny or Kenneth Gainwell or something like that, and you sprinkle in something like that, on top of a second. I think that would work.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard. I don't think. And I think it'd be hard to get him for a 2nd-round pick. I think what's more likely, what I think you could sell him for, especially when August gets here and people are looking for running backs, maybe you send him off for a player like a Jerry Jeudy, a player like
I'm holding Jerry there, but you ain't getting Jerry from me for Pierce, that's for sure.
I think, I think when people are looking at it this season, I think, Dameon Pierce falls into that mid-tier, low-end RB2 territory in Dynasty leagues when you look at most rankings. I think, maybe this time of year in June, running backs are a little bit depressed to the boat. I think once you're starting to get toward August, though, those running back prices start skyrocketing way up because people are about to set their lineups and they're like, oh, well, I actually need to start a running back. So
projections are down.
Yeah, well, and people just abandon ship on running backs in the offseason. And then, once the season comes back again, all of a sudden they have a market for him. So Dameon Pierce, somebody I would be exploring for maybe a low-end wide receiver 2, a high-end wide receiver 3 in Dynasty leagues. I'm trying to think of some of the other names in that range that are just eluding me right now. Who's around Jerry Jeudy that you would say in a Dynasty league right now? Maybe like in that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 territory.
Would you trade Mike Evans in a second for him?
If I needed a running back, I would trade. If I thought it was going to be a late 2nd-round pick, I would do that.
Yeah, I think I don't think that's a bad deal. I mean, especially if you have receiver depth, like if you're kind of, flipping your value there. I think that's very equitable. I certainly wouldn't give up someone young like Jerry Jeudy in that type of deal. So like the wide receiver 2 range, I think that yeah, it's definitely got to be in the backer end and then higher end wide receiver 3. And I feel like Mike Evans fits that mold, per whoever's dynasty rankings you're looking at, whether it's back end wide receiver 2 or front end wide receiver 3. I feel like he fits that mold.
Mm-hmm. Maybe like, somebody else, maybe I would explore like seeing if you can maybe get if I was a building team, maybe I would look for Dameon Pierce. Maybe I wouldn't shove him out, running back out the door for a contending team. But if you saw yourself more as a rebuilder this year, Traylon Burks is somebody also I might be targeting for Dameon Pierce. Next player I have up is Rhamondre Stevenson. Another polarizing player just because of the New England backfield factor. Another player, didn't get a lot of work as a rookie. 4th round draft capital, but really came on, was very productive. Despite his bigger size, is very elusive, is a great pass catcher. So not just your typical bruising running back that you would think for somebody who's a larger player like him. And there's more of a range, I guess, of higher outcomes this year because of the fact that Dameon Pierce is gone. Maybe he's going to get a full-time role here, but this is still New England. We know how Bill Belichick likes to pigeonhole these running backs into particular roles. So what's interesting is I seem to have more pass catching almost running backs now. You got Pierre Strong back there. I forget the other. Kevin Harris is back there too. So, with those kind of players, do we see Rhamondre Stevenson more slotted into an early down role? So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Do you see Rhamondre Stevenson's talent profile being somebody who can, have a nice 2 to 3 year production window here going forward?
Yeah, I think that he could have a good window, but if we're talking just buy or sell candidate, I think I'm more in the alignment of sell. I feel like a top 10 finish and back-to-back seasons in a Patriots offense for a running back is very difficult. And I think the big growth and the big step forward for him that we saw was based on volume. The yards per touch and the yards per carry are very similar, from his rookie to his sophomore season. It's just that you saw him get a ton more carries. You saw him get a ton more catches, right? So he was just included heavily more so in the offense. And I felt like the offense was a little bit dried up last season. I felt like you were just really looking around for anybody that could help carry the load, and there was just nobody in sight. And while I'm not overly impressed with, Mike Gesicki being added or Juju Smith-Schuster, again, it feels like a situation where the talent levels have risen around the star player from the previous season. So I'm expecting a little bit of a decline. I do not expect him to be a top 10 running back this season. I think with the improved health of some other backs, along with just a smidge bit of a regression, I think that you see him fall to maybe running back 11 to 15 territory. And so this is a situation where the market is so high on him, I would be willing to sell. Again, like you had mentioned, Bill Belichick just loves to cut up those touches. He's still 25 years old, has a great frame at 230 pounds, and is still relatively young, just being, coming into his 3rd year in the league. I'm just a little bit more concerned, again, about that regression. It's hard for me to buy into running backs out of the Patriots offense in back-to-back seasons.
Jamie, this guy, one of the best listeners ever. He always is on the Face Off Network's podcast, and he's venturing over here as well. Jamie, shout out to you.
He was chilling with me and Andrew the other night. What's
up,
Jamie?
Yeah, he's a great guy, and he just got his Scott Fishbowl invite as well. So congrats to you, my friend. Have fun in that tournament this year.
Appreciate everybody on Twitter that banged the drum for me.
So next up, I don't think I talked about Rhamondre Stevenson yet. I'm losing it today. I need a 4th cup of coffee right after this. But so Rhamondre Stevenson, I think for a player that you can get maybe a 1st round pick +4, this is a guy who I would maybe be shopping for a running back. Everyone tries to sell their, I try to zig when others are zagging. So with everybody trying to sell their running backs in the middle of the summer, I like to wait and try to hold them right until August. So when August hits, Rhamondre Stevenson's value is going to shoot up because naturally people are going to be looking to run for running backs to fill those starting roles. So I like to avoid, in general, especially with these higher ranked running backs, I like to avoid guys in bad offenses because there's a lot working against them. Could have a lot of short drives, lack of touchdown opportunities. If the Patriots are getting beat up, are they going to move away from the run game? I know Rhamondre Stevenson is part of the pass game, but still, there's a lot working against him there. the overall 4th-round draft capital. I know we're a couple of years out still, but there's a lot of things working against Rhamondre Stevenson. So if he's going to be ranked as a top 12 running back, and you could get, let's think here, maybe
a first at
Devonta
least.
Smith, a Chris Godwin, Christian Watson, those are guys I think potential sells, but as a contending team, those are always moves that I would make, especially if I'm not a strong contender. If I don't see myself as a top 3 or 4 team in the league, I always like to pivot off the running backs, maybe even put yourself in a position to compete this year, but just make it a little bit more safer. Usually as a contender though, I might be holding on to Rhamondre Stevenson still, but in most builds, I agree with you. He is a sell candidate, and if I can get a 1st-round pick plus in value in a super flex league, that's something I'd probably definitely be considering.
I think there's just a lot of hype around him though. Like if of all the players on the list here that you've put down, I think he's the most likely that you could get 2 1st-round picks for him, because people are just so excited about what he can be in that offense. And I get it. Like, believe me, Rhamondre, he made me some money last year, especially in like those weekly best ball drafts that we were doing. He was absolutely fantastic down the stretch, but I just don't see it being maintainable. I just don't see him being able to do it in back-to-back years. And like you had mentioned, just being in a bad offense, he's not a guy I expect to hit double-digit touchdowns, period. I feel like he's capped between probably 5 to 8 at most.
And he has a battering ram of a build though. My goodness. He wasn't targeted until other guys got hurt. That's a good point, Jamie.
And like we just said, the talent levels are rising. Like they have more guys there. They have more able bodies now. The roster is deeper.
Yeah, and it's always tough, especially, unless they're big, overarching, fantastic talents. When a guy gets to RB1 territory, I usually think like most running backs, they're a sell candidate. So, somebody who I would definitely be looking for, maybe a mid wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 2. See, maybe 2 1st-round picks could be a little bit tough. You might have to wait until a big game. Ty Montgomery, is that?
And JJ Taylor as well. It's Kevin Harris, Ty Montgomery, and JJ Taylor.
Yeah, so exactly. And we know how, like I said, the Patriots could deploy Rhamondre Stevenson more of an early down role, considering that they have, it seems like, a lot of pass-catching running backs on the roster. So with that, we'll dive into the wide receivers now. First up player I have is Devonta Smith, and I got it on Reddit last week for ranking Devonta Smith as my wide receiver 15. Whew. People
were too low, or
people were mad. Yeah, people were. It's too low, they were saying. And
I don't think that's bad.
I mean, you just look at it. It's just Devonta Smith. There's a lot of great wide receivers, and Devonta Smith, despite finishing as a wide receiver 1 last season, it's gonna be a lot to do that again. This offense is going to just have to continue just to be the best, which it is the best. It looks the best on paper, so it could be, but you're asking for a lot. There's Dallas Goedert. There's A.J. Brown. It's a run-first offense with a dual-threat quarterback. I mean, Devonta Smith, to even be I expect him to be a top 15 wide receiver this year, but for that to even happen, there's a lot's going right here still. So Devonta Smith, just because he's treated with so much respect. He doesn't have, we're moving away from that prototypical wide receiver that needs to be 6'3", but nonetheless, Devonta Smith has a bit of a smaller build. It's just, I think if you can get multiple 1st-round picks for Devonta Smith, who's going is a top 2 round player in startups right now, I would have to consider selling that. If you can get, looking at a running back, if you can get a top 7 or 8 running back, if you can get multiple 1st-round picks, if you can get a Jerry Jeudy and a 1st-round pick, a Christian Watson and a 1st-round pick for Devonta Smith, these are definitely moves I would consider making. I think he's going. He's going as an elite wide receiver now. He's gotten a lot of respect. People think maybe he can even outproduce A.J. Brown this season.
That's a bit rich. That's a bit rich. I think that a lot of people need to remember, because again, I think that a lot of this love is on the back of the success that many dynasty owners had with Devonta Smith down the stretch of last season, right? Like his last 8 games, 7 of them, he had, I think, at least 5 catches, and 8 of his last 9, he had at least 5 catches or 50 receiving yards. And I think 4 out of his last 5, he had at least 7 catches or more in each game. Like he was getting a huge target share, finished as wide receiver 9 on the season, but also that was backed on the Goddard injury. Goddard would miss a significant time down the stretch. And even when he came back, he just wasn't used at the same volume pre-injury. They were saving him up for the playoffs. I think that the good things for Devonta Smith are that the Eagles have a tougher schedule this upcoming season. They're going to be in more games. They're going to need to pass a little bit more than they ran last season, but I still feel that it puts him in a bye situation. And I'm only saying that because I have bought him this offseason. What are your thoughts on this trade that I completed? I moved off of Joe Mixon straight up for Devonta Smith.
That's insane to me. I just have a really hard. I don't know how you pulled that off. This is a dynasty league.
This is a dynasty league.
And this was this season.
I made this trade in April.
I can't believe someone did that. Now I don't think I would do that in a heartbeat for Devonta Smith. However, I just think his value is so much more high. I think you need 4 Joe Mixons from most people.
Ooh, wow. So I think the two first round picks I feel like is a bit rich. Like if you pull that off, like tip of the cap, clap of the hands, happy birthday, bring Jesus down.
He's in that territory to a lot of people. He's a top 12 dynasty wide receiver.
Then by all means sell. Like I'm not in those streets. Like if you're on the block where Devonta Smith is going for 2 firsts, then by all means sell him. But I do like buying him where I need a receiver. So in that specific league, I had Najee Harris, I have Aaron Jones, and I have Joe Mixon. But I was not very strong at receiver. I have like Mike Williams and Terry McLaurin, and then the rest was like dead weight. You know, like the guys that got me over the hump, like a Richie James last season in the playoffs. Yeah, great story, but I'm not trying to run that back for 2023, right? Isaiah Hodgins was on that list as well. So just another Giants receiver. But just like those plug and play guys, Hunter Renfrow, Jeff Wilson, I was mixing him into the flex and how this was playing out because I can only start obviously, 2 running backs and then, mix in or one of those other guys was falling into the flex. So for me, it was just about getting better value, just trying to balance out my roster. So yeah, it worked out for me in that situation. I agree. I was just like, well, I'll start with this and see what happens.
Jamie has it right. I think if you offered me Mixon and a first for Smith, I'd decline. See, this is where his value is. I think.
Hey, Jamie's a smart guy.
He's I just don't think that's practical for most managers. Like that's a steal. That's an absolute steal. You got one of those off-season market. No one knows what the market is because it's the off-season type of
consider
steal.
The source. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I mean,
Devonta Smith is I think if you go down the list of RB1s, I think Rhamondre Stevenson, Austin Eckler, these guys, I don't think that gets it done for most managers for Devonta Smith. You move up a little bit, Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris. I don't think that gets it done for Devonta Smith for most people. I think you're looking at, you could get Jahmyr Gibbs, you could get Travis Etienne, I think you could even get Saquon Barkley for Devonta Smith from, a guy maybe who wanted to pivot off of a running back. And I think, that's something I could, especially if I was a competing manager, I needed a running back, I'd do that. Maybe you're losing out on some long-term 3-year, 4-year production window here. But if I'm a contending team, I think those guys are set up for the next 2 seasons a little bit more than Devonta Smith. I think Devonta Smith, you're looking at the targets last season. I mean, he had 8+ targets in every single one of his final 9 games. I don't think that's hard to keep up. I think, so I think there could be some more up and down performances like we saw midway through the season and earlier on. So someone he
started off the year with 0 catches and 4 targets in game 1.
People were freaking out. I think he settles in more as a wide receiver 2, mid-tier wide receiver 2 territory this season. So I think, if I'm a competing team and I could sell for a top 7 or 8 running back, I think I would consider doing that. And I think that's more the territory that Smith is even in. And that's what I'm saying. That's over 2. That's like 2 first-round picks of value, like I was saying.
So again, and for this conversation, I personally would not give up 2 firsts, but if you can do it, if you can get a haul for him, then yeah, he should be in sell territory for me. I obviously willing to buy because I was able to get him at a steal and a deal.
The police are on their way to your house right now.
It's April. I mean, it's 2 months of time has gone by. It's different in the fantasy world, man.
Joe Mixon, who back in April wasn't even going to be a Bengal, who was about to be suspended this season, had stuff going on. That's highway robbery, is what you got away with. So in April, a running back, come on now, that's insane.
I should name that team Too Fast, Too Furious. That's how the whole series started, was highway robbery.
That was a good one. I like that. Next up though, T. Higgins almost somebody who I have in the same breath. T. Higgins is a very good wide receiver. He would be the best wide receiver I wish he was on the Kansas City Chiefs. He'd be the best wide receiver for so many NFL teams. But in the Cincinnati offense, I just wonder. I love T. Higgins, but when he's being ranked as a top 12 dynasty wide receiver, I just wonder if, just like Devonta Smith, if this is a good sell high point. Because he's always going to play second fiddle to Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase garners 10 plus targets every single game he's out there. T. Higgins, more of kind of that underneath threat. I just don't know. T. Higgins is going to be a very good wide receiver for a long time. I just don't know if there's room for him to be that top 12 wide receiver with Cincinnati with Jamar Chase. So this is another guy who, if I can get, I'm looking at what's his wide receiver finishes over the last few years? He hasn't finished as a top 15 wide receiver yet.
24, and 28.
Yeah, exactly. So
not great.
I mean, this is a guy who I think also you could get 2 first-round picks of value for. And if that's the case, if I can get a Saquon Barkley, a Travis Etienne, Jahmyr Gibbs, a top 5, 6 running back in Dynasty, if I can get a Christian Watson and a first-round pick or something like that, there's a lot of moves I think that make him a sell. So Jamie checking. I'm always debating Higgins and Devontae in Dynasty and best balls and always end up going with Higgins. I mean, for me, as a extreme Dynasty ageist, I can't help myself. I would also go T. Higgins there, but I think most managers usually value T. Higgins a bit more than Devontae Adams. So what's your thoughts on T. Higgins going forward?
I have to be more of a sell category or candidate, if you will. It's just tough for me to expect those high yield returns in that offense alongside Jamar Chase. You're betting on him, being productive in the place of an injury or missed opportunities for other positions. Like if this team was missing Joe Mixon right now, like if they had moved on from him, maybe I'd feel a little bit better. But top 12 in Dynasty, you're just looking at the age. That's really all that you're looking at. You're looking at the next 6 years rather than the next 2 to 3.
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, when he gets onto a new roster at some point, I don't expect him to be like a career Bengal. I think, he's going to have higher returns and higher potential. I think years 27 through 30 could be his most productive seasons.
And, so that's, looking forward, just like Devonta Smith, I think if you're trading for maybe a running back, you're losing out on that long 5 or 6 year window, but that's not really what the window that we're playing in. I like to look at 2 to 3 year stretches here. So Higgins, I think, could get you a very valuable producer, multiple value producers over these next couple seasons where he might still just be a wide receiver 2 in Dynasty leagues. Fine production, but not upper tier, nothing that's going to push your team over the top and win you a championship, I think.
And he's a field stretcher. Like when you look at his his yards per target, 9.47, 9.92, yards per catch, 13.89, 14.74. Like he's not like Devonta Smith, who I think has a little bit more of a reliable role in that Eagles offense as a lower A dot slot type of receiver, where you have AJ Brown breaking out the deep field. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, they do a lot of the same things. So I just feel like that you're working with 2 really, really good receivers. And, with how close Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are, like he is locked into that top 5 wide receiver conversation. I think T. Higgins would also fit that mold if Jamar Chase wasn't there and we're not betting on injuries, especially with receivers.
It just, man. And also, Jamie's talking about the contract in the chats. You're looking at $55 million for Joe Burrow. You're looking at 30 to 35 million for Jamar Chase. And then what's T. Higgins going to get? $25 million?
And why would he do that when the open market's going to pay him just as much as Chase?
Well, I mean, that's what I mean. Like, I think it could, $25 million plus, you know what I mean? So I think, I think T. Higgins would sign for that, but that is an incredible investment to put into 3 players, 2 wide receivers and your quarterback, the offensive line's not going to get better if that's the case. That defense is going to be rough. So
nothing's going to get better. Nothing's going to get better, period.
So, I question whether, I know that T. Higgins, I know that they want to keep that trio together, but I wonder how practical it is because, man, you are going to be thin at a lot of spots on your roster, especially when you're paying T. Higgins for wide receiver, dominant wide receiver production when he's maybe not going to get that with Jamar Chase. I think that's maybe a little bit of a waste. So I don't know what the Bengals will do here, but it'll be very interesting to see. Moving on to the last two, the tight ends that I'd wanted to talk about here. It's hard. Kyle, how can we not do this without Kyle Pitts, the man, the myth, the legend himself? It's really hard. I love Kyle Pitts so much. I love the talent. Just look what he did last year. He was number 5 in air yards after missing 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
He was asked to be a wide receiver last year. He wasn't put in a great spot to succeed. Wasn't put in line to take advantage of matchups or anything like that. So it was a tough year for him. And I just don't know if it's going to get better with Bijan Robinson and Arthur Smith. It's just you gave the most run-heavy offensive coach Bijan Robinson. It's just with Desmond Ridder, I just question if this is going to be another kind of lost season for Kyle Pitts. So I'm a little bit sad as an owner in so many dynasty leagues. What do you think? Is he a buy candidate? Is there brighter? Is it going to get brighter around the corner here, or is he maybe 2024 the season that we'll be waiting on for Kyle Pitts?
I think our perception of the Falcons is just different. So I really don't know, because I feel like, again, this is a good situation for Kyle Pitts because the talent levels are rising. I think that Desmond Ridder will, in product, in results, be better than Marcus Mariota. I believe that having him alongside Drake London for another year is a very good thing. And adding Bijan is even a better thing because they have a great offensive line. It will be a more of a run-first type of team. Yeah, Kyle Pitts isn't walking into the Bengals locker room next season. I get that. But at the same time, who else is going to catch passes after Drake London? I feel like it's a very, very good situation. And this is a player who's coming off of, an injury-ridden season, but he also finished as tight end 6 as a rookie. Like, I think that all signs point to obvious progression from last year, but I think that a top 12 tight end season is well inbound here this next season. I don't know if I want to go as high as to say 6, but I think 5 through 10 is certainly within question here. I just think that you're not getting a ton of exposure to like touchdowns because you're going to have Bijan, you're going to have Tyler Algier there who showed out last year, and they will run the ball a lot. But I think his PPR value, and especially in tight end premium leagues, he's right up there. I do not believe that you can obtain him for anything less than a first round pick. So where I would want to say buy, I don't know if me personally, like I would want to buy right now. I would probably want to buy a little bit closer to the season when I feel a little bit better giving up that first round pick, when maybe, you're getting a little bit of, better results out of training camp, a little bit more, a little bit more of a positive message, we'll say, from the beat reporters, whatever you need to, say it's green light go for Pitts. I don't see him being someone that's going to be able to be purchased on the cheap or not get a good return. If I'm selling him right now, I'm expecting at least a first round pick, given his age, given the volatility at the position, take into consideration some previous production in his rookie season, the athleticism, the build. I think he's going to have a good season. So I'm willing to buy, especially if the market's in your side where, it's going to be not a great year for him. Give me all the Kyle Pitts I can get.
I mean, you talked about top 12, top 10. I mean, Taysom Hill can have 3 good games and he finishes as top 12 tight end. It's just, I think if he...
Well, then his high range of outcomes should be 3 or 4.
That's his higher range of outcomes. But if he's just a top 10 tight end, if it's 700 yards, you know what I mean? If it's 700 yards and a few scores, it's top 10. That'll slide in, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Top 10 production. I just don't know. It's hard because Desmond Ridder, they were already 31st in pass plays per game last year, 6.2 yards per pass attempt. With considering all that, not an upper echelon passer by any means, can he sustain if Kyle Pitts is head and shoulders above Drake London on the target share, I think he could be very, very good. But I just don't know if that's going to be the case. It could be flip-flopping between these two, and I just don't think Desmond Ridder has enough juice to sustain multiple wide receivers. Jamie talking about, I do think if Arthur Smith were to dedicate to putting Kyle Pitts actually in line where he could play against these linebackers, exactly, I think he would be a lot better. But when he's asked to go against cornerbacks all the time, young tight end, that's tough on him.
Let's talk about Mac Hollins a little bit. I know you're gonna give me a weird look. Go ahead, it's fine.
I like
He's one of the highest rated run blocking receivers in the NFL per PFF. I think that he is going to be on the field a lot with London and Pitts. Now, that's not some declaration of, hey, go pick up Mac Hollins in Dynasty or in Best Ball or Redraft, but I think he is going to be an integral part of the offense where he's going to play a lot of snaps. He maybe use more of a blocker and only get, maybe 30 or 40 receptions this upcoming season. But I do believe that his experience and his involvement in this offense should push Kyle Pitts to more opportunities to either come out of the slot or to be lined up with linebackers. It's not an amazing move, but it's moving some chess pieces around. That's for sure.
I think, in the first 4 or 5 weeks, Kyle Pitts is going to have a couple quiet performances in there. And I'm going to put a delayed buy on my Kyle Pitts because I do love the long-term talent. I think he has a lot of production, in the future ahead of him. However, I think 2023 is going to be another up and down season. So I think, midway, a few weeks into the season, I think Kyle Pitts is going to be a buy. I've seen Kyle Pitts already be traded for Mark Andrews, pretty much straight up. I've seen Kyle Pitts, go for, Kyle Pitts is being sold for cheaper. And I think, but what I think is,
so now he should be a buy then. Because like I said, I think if you're selling a first round pick now, I think it's probably that plus more later.
I think it's going lower. I think you can get Kyle Pitts for even lower during the season. That's why I'm going to put a delayed buy on him because I do actually like where he's going now, but I think it's going to be even. I think we're going to see that value even decrease a little bit, maybe even more this season as people want that now production. So Kyle Pitts, very polarizing player. I hope for my dynasty sake, I hope you're right. And I hope it's just wheels off. And I'm hoping 1,000-yard season.
Really quick. If let's say you're a dynasty owner and you're just barren at the position, let's say you have Dalton Schultz, Jake Ferguson, and I don't know, Cade Otton, right? Would you rather give up a second for another player like that or a first for Kyle Pitts right now in June?
That's easy. I would give up a first. I would give up a first for Kyle Pitts. I just wonder though if you even going to need to in a couple months. I
don't see him ever going for anything lower than that.
I think especially, I would want, I think as long as that pick, I don't think it's going to be top 6. I would do that. I think, Kyle Pitts is starting, he's moving down rankings quite a bit. So Kyle Pitts going to be a very good buy, I think, shortly. We'll get into our last player though, Greg Dulcich. This is another one that I think, I feel like I think I've said every player on this list is a sell. I didn't even think about that before I started the show. That's just how I pitched every single player almost, I feel like. So, but Greg Dulcich.
What a mindset, bud.
That's me in the summer. That's my mindset in the summer for my dynasty leagues. I just look at like which players do I want off my roster, and that's how I base every single trade.
Give me them picks.
Greg Dulcich, though, moving into a new offense, new coach, that always concerns me for a rookie tight end. Obviously, the Denver Broncos really liked him last year. They thrust him in. He missed the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season and immediately threw him back out there. However, they did bring in some tight ends, and I just wonder, with a revamped offense, how much are they going to look to the tight end again? I think, tight ends are always, their target production is always so volatile historically, unless you're a true game changer. Just moving over coaches when we're already anticipating Greg Dulcich to be a tight end 1 almost again. That's, that I'd be exploring what I can get. Any tight end, it's hard to get incredible value for him, but I'd actually take especially if I didn't think it was going to be like a late second round pick, I would take what I would thought to be maybe would be a mid to early second round pick for Greg Dulcich. I would see what I could maybe add, what do you need to add for maybe a David Njoku and Evan Ingram? Those would be the moves I would see if I can explore for a Greg Dulcich player. What about for you?
I want to buy him because I don't think he costs anything. I mean, if I can get Devonta Smith for Joe Mixon, I can get him for a third. You
can't be pitching that to people. You can't be like you can't be just counting on steals.
There's no way that I'm starting that conversation in a trade with a second round pick. I'm certainly starting it off with a third. And again, consider the source, the trade thief, Mr. Highway Robbery, whatever. I mean, that's where you want to start the conversation. And I feel like there is going to be some opportunities where you're going to be able to make that trade. You're going to be able to complete that swap. Again, if you have an owner that is, maybe high-end tight end, maybe they've got Kelsey and they've got, a David Njoku, but then they drafted Dulcich. I could absolutely see that being a possibility. But again, if he's on more of a barren roster where, that guy's looking for a starter in return or, more of a live option, yeah, I could move myself into that second round pick territory. But I don't feel like he's a player that I need to send any players for. It should just be a matter of whatever draft pick that you can get off of. I don't think the market's high on him at all. I mean, I am. I've said many good things about Greg Dulcich, and that's why I'm willing to do it, but I don't want to overpay for him. I do not believe he should cost the same as David Njoku, or who was the other name you said? Was it Evan Ingram?
Evan Ingram.
No, those guys should be going at a much higher cost. They're in offenses that have better quarterbacks right now, at least in my opinion. Maybe Deshaun Watson and Russ Wilson are a bit of an even swap there, but I trust Kevin Stefanski a little bit more, knowing his players, knowing his system, having that playbook put together. He's been building something. Sean Payton, yeah, I expect him to make the offense a little bit better. They should progress as a unit, but it's also kind of more of a middle group. And then looking at the Jaguars, they're just going to pass a lot. So I really like Evan Ingram, at least for this upcoming season. Dulcich probably has a better 4 to 5 year window, but I do believe that those players, those tight ends, should be going at a higher cost than Greg Dulcich. Like, yeah, there's been some nice things said about him, but I feel like his presence should be closer to under the radar than above it. So I would buy him. I do not want to buy a ton of him, and I don't want to spend a lot on him. Excuse me.
I think the fantasy manager, the owner of Greg Dulcich, is probably likes him. So, I think it's going to be hard to. I think it'd be nearly impossible to probably buy him for a third from most people. I don't think most.
What was his dynasty draft capital? Round 3?
Yeah, probably.
I don't think owners are going to be
nobody's just going to sell for a random third. They're not going to. That would be an easy cash. I would buy Greg Dulcich for that, but I think you could. Like I said, I think you could add a little sprinkle on top for a more of a borderline more consistent borderline tight end one, like a David Njoku and Evan Ingram, somebody kind of in that mold, maybe a Pat Freiermuth or somebody like that. I don't think that's that far off, especially in dynasty leagues. I think people are excited about the new offense. I think especially when a needy dynasty manager is coming, looking for a tight end to fill the roster because there's just not that many of them in August. Mm-hmm. I think you could get a second round pick. I think, yeah, easy.
No, I'm not going to argue that, but I just don't want to pay that, right out of the gate. I'm not going to start the conversation with a second, because most likely that can evolve into a second and a player, or a second and another pick, or whatever. So I'm going to start it. I'm going to start at round 3, and we'll go from there. Maybe I can do round 3 and a player. I'd feel a little bit better about that. But I don't want to start at the high end, asking price for him, in my opinion.
Hey, look! I told you, Brian Ford, Dynasty, Dulcich over Ingram.
Yeah, like I said, better 3 to 4 year window. But this next upcoming season, Ingram has a much higher ceiling, in my opinion.
So, but I think a lot of people feel that way, though. So for me personally, I would trade just for the immediate production. I don't really like to project tight ends out long period of time. I have a bad history with tight ends, so I really don't trust the position. So if I would trade Dulcich for Ingram straight up, just because I like Evan Ingram's prospects this year better. And that's just what I bet on in the tight end position, unless it's like an overarching, great talent like a Kyle Pitts. So for me, I disagree with Brian, but I think most people, I think, actually agree with Brian, or like at least close to what Brian says about Evan Ingram and Dulcich being close. So for me, that's why I would say Dulcich is a sell. So Brian, I think falls in line with more of what the consistent fantasy community thinks of Greg Dulcich, which I'm just so wary of the tight end position. Just because I'm jaded. I'm a jaded person when it comes to the tight end position. I've been screwed so many times. So that's why I try to get bet on just immediate production, try to sell these tight ends that are kind of looked as longer term, young, talented players, because there's just they always face plant. It always happens. It's always a frustrating position. So that's why they're always usually a sell. But with that, we'll wrap it up here, my friend. You got some closing thoughts? You want to give us some inspirational talk for the week or anything like that?
Don't start trade conversations with high draft picks.
I'll tell you, for me,
you can't rob anybody that way.
You will not grab my attention that way. I tell you, I do agree with you. I try to, I don't throw out any big names or try to buy low, but for me, you got to come with a little juice, because I'll just ignore you if you don't. If you try to send me if you sent me Greg Dulcich in the third, decline. I'm not replying back.
You gotta know your people. You gotta know your league, man. I'm watching a lot of that, a lot of the Survivor. So I learned to read people. Now you've told me. Now you've told me if I'm in a league with you. Yeah, see, exactly. And now I know if I want to make a deal with Emerson, I got it. Like you said, I got to bring a little bit more juice. But you didn't trade me Devonta Smith for Joe Mixon, so
we need to get some SGP and Dynasty leagues going. It's been a while. We need to
I'm
get
waiting.
The crew going.
I'm waiting. I thought we were going to have the Twitter league, where we have all of our trades out on Twitter.
All right, we'll get something going in August here. But anyway, we're gonna wrap it up. You'll find us back here next Sunday. You'll find me on the Face Off Sports Network a couple times this week. And of course, I write and produce for Player Profilers. Well, definitely check out The Dominator tonight with Billy Musio, and I'll be producing that. So have a great rest of your night, everyone, and we will see you soon.